Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWEG. We're glad that you are joining us today. We are going to be hearing from Jennifer Walker-Thomas and Emma Petty-Addams, who are MWEG's co-executive directors. They are going to share what they have been up to on behalf of MWEG and some of the organizations that they've been meeting with and connections that they've been able to make for MWEG and moving us along, and some of the exciting things that are going to be happening here in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Emma.
Thanks so much, Rachel, and thanks for those of you who are joining us here on Zoom as well as on Facebook, and those who are watching later, because we know that most of you like to have the flexibility of watching it whenever you can. So we're so glad that you give a little bit of your time to us, and we're really excited to talk to you about what Jen and I have been up to on your behalf over the past month or so. I'm not going to lie, it's been a little bit crazy in that we have both been traveling all over the country, speaking and doing Zoom calls. And there's a lot of interest right now in the work that we're doing. There's been a lot of interest in the work we're doing for a while, but it seems to have kind of increased over the past few months in particular. And we're currently getting more invitations than we can possibly keep up with, which is exciting. And so we're going to talk to you today about a couple of the conferences we've attended and the panels that we've sat on where we represent you and talk about faith and democracy, talk about the intersection of pro-democracy work and peacemaking, and more than anything, what we do when we attend these events, we talk about you and what you're doing, because that's really what makes MWEG go. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the American Democracy Summit. I was supposed to speak to you about this a couple weeks ago, but I was on another trip and my flight got canceled, then delayed, and then redirected to El Paso. I spent the night in El Paso 2 weeks ago, and then I didn't make it back in time to talk to you. So I'm glad to get the chance now. So the American Democracy Summit was a gathering of about 1,000 or so people from around the country who are committed to both electoral reform and democracy as an idea. And there was numerous panels throughout the 3-day conference. Jessica Larson, our MWEG director of our Protecting Democracy Advocacy, was there, as well as our intern, Alexa Dadson, who goes to USC, and it worked out great to have her there as well. So we had a couple of MWEG representatives there and lots of friends. I've been only really attending conferences on behalf of MWEG for the past year or so, and the first couple times I went, I was just kind of didn't know anyone, and no one knew who we were, and I'd have to, give our pitch about who we were every time I met, and they would look at me and they would tell me like, oh, that's interesting. And it's changed a lot. And this year, every conference I've attended or event I've attended, before I can hardly get the words MWEG or Mormon Women for Ethical Government out of my mouth, they're already like, their eyes light up and they already know exactly who we are, they know what we're doing, and they're excited to talk to us. So that is kind of a fun thing, that all the work you're doing is paying off and getting attention. So at this summit, we were invited to speak on 2 panels, and both had to do with faith and democracy, the intersection of religion and the public sphere. And this is such an interesting topic, and one that we think about so much as MWEG leaders, and you certainly do as people, women of faith who are in the public sphere. The first panel was really all about it was led off with this question about how America is not necessarily a melting pot, but a potluck nation. So Ibu Patel, who is the CEO of Interfaith America, had done a kind of full conference session speaking engagement earlier. And one of the representatives of Interfaith America was there to kind of ask this question, this idea that a potluck relies on people's contributions. And a potluck is boring if we all bring the same dish. And you want a diversity of dishes, and you want them mingling and mixing between them. And so the question that was asked to us as MWEG was what do we bring to the potluck? And I was going to answer the question literally like, what would you actually literally bring to the potluck? Like, what dish? But I chose to answer it more symbolically. And what do we as MWEG bring to the democracy potluck? What do we as women of faith who have a particular history and belief system and theology and understanding of how to engage in the public sphere, what do we bring to the potluck? And so what I talked about you, I told the story of MWEG, I talked about our members and where you are, kind of got those details out of the way. And then I told them that what you all bring to the potluck is proactive peacemaking. And I think peacemaking, as we've discussed regularly here, is a very misunderstood word. It's often a stand-in for being nice or passive, or letting people kind of, do what they're going to do and doing your own thing on the side. And as you all know, you've been here long enough, that's not how we see peacemaking. And that's why adding that proactive piece to it, I think really helps illuminate what we mean. And so then I went straight into this idea that our faith has unique insights on suffering and power, and how we engage with the brokenness of the world, with structures of power, and how we should be governing ourselves. And so this is something we've talked about a lot over the past couple of years. I think I told this story a while ago that I had a period of time where I would wake up every morning and the word power was on my mind, and which could go either way. People could be like, that's kind of odd. Why is she thinking about power all the time? But when I'm thinking about power, I'm talking about like the real political power that we each can access and use to make ethical changes. And you can't really engage in the political sphere without thinking about power. And the problem is, if you just think about power on its own, without kind of connecting it to some sort of an ethical framework, I think it becomes problematic. But we have so much beautiful theology within our religion about power and how it can be used in a way that's persuasive and not coercive, and beautiful and helpful. So when you connect any use of influence and power directly to peacemaking, that's one of the things that really, I think, helps. It allows us to be productive and ethical in a sphere that's riddled with corruption, idolatry, and contention. So we as an organization, both collectively as leadership and you as individuals, are super focused on growing and wielding power that is protective, not exploitative, principled, not partisan, and persuasive, not coercive. So that was kind of my spiel that I gave to them to introduce MWEG. So that's something that we think about a lot. I guess it's more than a spiel. I don't want to undercut it. It is the reality of what we do every day, and it helps. And it's where our power comes from, and it's where our influence and our ability to be effective comes from. A couple other things that I talked about at this panel were about what happens, the problems that we run into when one faith dominates, and the responsibilities of a faith that might be a majority faith in any given place. We talked a little bit about how we are a minority faith in most of the US, but we are a majority faith in a place like Utah. And so we have kind of a special responsibility in a space like Utah to lead out and to be like the most inclusive people around. And I use the example of this Utah Rooting Out Racism project that we've been working on for the past little while, and how we absolutely, as we built this coalition, needed to be just inviting in a huge diversity of faith, race, geography, age, and making sure that it was incredibly inclusive. And I think we've really succeeded at that. And then we talked a little bit about how to expand our understandings and discussion of democracy beyond a Judeo-Christian framework. There was at least one member of the panel. It was a woman who was a Sikh woman, and she talked about that specifically. And those of us who were Christian talked about how we kind of expand our vision beyond that. And I think the last thing, we talked about religious freedom a little bit. One of the last things that we talked about was how religiously diverse communities can really contribute to American democracy. And this is something that, we saw what we did in Nevada in 2020, when we pulled together a panel or an event around counting the vote. And we had just a beautiful rainbow of faiths present and involved in that. I think it's also, an example is in Nebraska in 2018, a group of us from MWEG pulled together there was a vigil happening at a synagogue after the Tree of Life massacre in Pittsburgh, and a group of MWEG members stood outside the synagogue afterwards holding candles, kind of lighting the pathway as the congregants left the vigil. And it was just this extraordinary moment, because the background here is that the synagogue shares a walkway with my church building next door, which was a stake center. So we literally kind of share a walkway and share parking lots at times. And as they walked out, the members of that synagogue said, "Are you our neighbor?" And what they meant was, "Are you literally our neighbor?" But of course, as they said it, we all recognized that was exactly this. It was also that they were our neighbor, like in the biblical sense. And I think the big takeaway that I had, and Jen also did an interfaith panel about the same time, and I think my big takeaway is that when we do interfaith engagement, either individually as individual people or collectively together as MWEG and officially as an institution, I just feel like God smiles on us. I just felt this like overwhelming sense that there was peace, that we were doing the right thing, that we were supposed to be engaging in this way, that us being as a leader of MWEG, out in the public sphere, talking on behalf of all of you and representing you, that was a worthy and good thing to do. And that the more that we can engage together with members of other faith, and the more that we can think about and talk about and really use and bring our theology and our experience to the public sphere, that's a really good thing. So I'm so grateful for the chance that I could do that, and appreciate all the stories I brought of MWEG members. I mean, this is only a little bit of what I talked about, but I told the story of Trisha Bunderson and her beautiful post about being a poll worker on Instagram from 2022. And I talk about you all the time, and appreciate that you provide us with an endless number of examples of ways to do this well. So I'll end there and pass it over to Jen to talk about her experiences.
Jen, you're
I will
muted.
never, I know I will never, ever unmute myself on time. So everyone just adjust. So I also, like Emma, have had a couple of opportunities recently to explain how faith motivates what we do here at MWEG, and how it's a driving factor in our engagement and sustains us in spite of sort of the difficult nature of this work. And one of the opportunities I had was to speak to a group called A More Perfect Union, which is basically a collaboration of Jewish faith leaders who are partnering to support democracy. And so these could be rabbis, these could be community leaders, these could be individuals who guide organizations that are civically minded, but based in the Jewish faith. And it was a really wonderful opportunity to speak to them about how our faith is helping and supporting us as we strive to create a broader culture of democracy. And I'm always extremely grateful for the opportunities to speak. It's sort of, I think we all have this experience where because we come from a church where we are regularly asked to participate in giving a talk or giving a lesson, we know probably better than most how much we really personally benefit when we have the opportunity to think about an issue deeply and understand how much it means to us in a way that then allows us to share that with other people. And taking the time to explore the elements of our faith that really contribute to a culture of democracy, and how we are interpreting that as an organization and sharing those ideas with the broader world was a really wonderful opportunity. So I was able to talk about the way that for MWEG, our work and our commitment to democracy is deeply grounded in our core belief that we are all children of God and that we all are of equal value. And the idea that that to deny people their agency and their ability to self-actualize, also this being one of the most important reasons that we are here on this earth theologically, is to learn and to grow and to experience and to try things and to work to build something good in the patterns of our heavenly parents. And to be able to share that is what motivates me to do my work about in support of democracy was a really beautiful thing. And I had lots of people asking questions about that. And I think that's true, not just of me, but all of you on this call. There's something deep and foundational in us that is theologically grounded, that tells us that we are all of equal value to God. We are his children. We have a special emphasis on that in our church, and that we all have to have the opportunity to grow and learn and develop. And democracy is a beautiful opportunity for people to exercise their agency in ways that other government systems are not. I also really was able to share one of the core tenets behind our principal voter campaign, which is found, in Matthew 22, where we're told that we should love the Lord our God with all of our heart and all of our might and minds, and then that's the first and great commandment, and that the second is like unto it, that we should love our neighbor as ourselves, which just it goes back to what Emma was talking about in her experience with the synagogue, that if we love our neighbor then we have to be willing to engage politically in ways that absolutely first does them no harm, but that also we are expressing sincere care and well-being for them in the same way that we would want someone else to do for us. And it is a really different framing of politics as a getting power for myself, getting power for my tribe, solving problems for my people and my nearest and dearest, but thinking collaboratively about what it means to make decisions with the true divinity and well-being of your neighbors in mind. Then the final thing that I was able to share, which is a concept that's super dear to my heart, which is the idea of Zion. There is so much talk right now in pro-democracy circles of the beloved community of this vision that Martin Luther King Jr. shared with us of a fair and just society where people could self-actualize to the highest degree. And it is just such a glorious thing to have deep wells of faith that stem from an understanding of the possibility of Zion, what Zion communities have looked like in the past, the pathway to building them in the future, and knowing that I'm doing it with a group of people who have also covenanted to do that is extraordinary. And to be able to share that drives so many of our women, this desire to build something different than what we are enjoying now, that is inclusive of all of God's children, and that it is a place in which all of us can thrive is an important, I think, motivator for our work that stems directly from our faith. And it was really a privilege to share that with the people on that call. It has been heart-wrenching for me to then know that shortly thereafter, the degree of suffering that so many of those communities were experiencing right after that, and these communities of the Jewish faith. And it has made me really think about how I need to do a better job, both as an individual and we as an organization, trying constantly to find ways to reach out and make connections with those communities. There was a little bit of a joke at the beginning of the call that they were so grateful to have us on, that we have traditionally been seen as sort of an isolated group of people and sort of kind of in our own little bubble. And that one of the things that had been really pleasing to the people that were organizing this call is, as they've worked with MWEG, was to see that their understandings of us as a people had not always been true, that all of the women that they've been able to interact with from MWEG have been not isolationists, but very much a desire to, like Emma said, connect with other faith communities and participate with them in the building of our democracy. Then the second thing, and I'll just share this briefly, is I also had the opportunity last week to attend the National Council on Dialogue and Deliberation, which is an enormous gathering of for close to 1,000 people who have dedicated their lives to the concepts of dialogue and deliberation, of building spaces in which people talk about problems in a way that kind of reduces violence and figure out systems and structures that help us as a democracy deliberate to come to conclusions about our problems and to maybe come actually sometimes to some policy solutions, which we see less and less happening, but is the ideal in a democratic society. And one of the things that really struck me, again, it was like Emma said, it's such an amazing experience that it's super hard for me to articulate. I have never been to this conference before. I knew a handful of people there. So it's a little intimidating to walk into a professional conference as a person who's been a stay-at-home mom for lots and lots of years before kind of returning to work with MWEG, and figure out, how am I going to navigate this? How am I going to meet all these different people? And the extraordinary gift that comes from being able to say, I am Jen Thomas, I'm from Mormon Women for Ethical Government, and have a ridiculous amount of people say, oh, we've heard of you. Oh, those things they've heard are good. And had one woman express that her congressperson had said that some of the best letters that they received came from MWEG members. Just really casual things that I think we take for granted, but the ways that your influence for good is spreading out into the world. I had the opportunity there to present on a panel about how organizations that are smaller can collaborate and work together in ways that magnify their efforts, and we get a whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. And at the end of this conversation, one woman came up to me and she said, "This is so contrary to the way things are done in the nonprofit sphere." And she said, "And as you were talking about this," she said, "it was so sincere that this was clearly the way that you thought about the world as a way to build abundance and work together." And she said, "Where have you gotten that idea? How in this society did you ever actually develop as an individual this idea that people could work together and that from that togetherness could come greater abundance?" And it was a great joy to be able to say, I learned that from my faith community. I learned that from growing up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That has been my experience over and over again. When good people come together and bring what they have to the table, there is a loaves and fishes experience, particularly when that work is consecrated for good. And I said, and I have only seen that pattern as we have tested it with MWEG to be proven. I've not only seen that it is something that works in my church community, but these are true principles that when we, with hope and faith, go out into the world and bring what we have, add our fish or our loaf to the basket, that particularly in interfaith work, there is truly a divine influence that magnifies those efforts as people of faith work to do good for God's children. So we just wanted to share those opportunities with you. They are, I think I speak for both Emma and I, they are precious. They are really extraordinary moments in our lives when we just stop and think and are kind of overwhelmed a little bit with what thousands of women of our faith have brought, and in coming together and just giving little bits of their time, little bits of their talents, a little bit of their allegiance, have allowed us to build an organization that is increasingly well-known and has a reputation for all the things that Emma and I have talked about: using power well, understanding the role that individuals can play in building a healthy democracy, having a vision of an abundant, beloved community where everyone has what they need, and a fierce commitment that sometimes only women maybe can have to the protection of individual souls and helping them to accomplish their full potential. So that is just all I want to share with you. It is just an extraordinary privilege to be doing this work, and we would not be able to do it without all of you joining with us in those efforts and lending us your credibility and voices, and we're so grateful for that.
Thank you, Emma and Jen, for sharing those experiences and sharing some updates on the spaces that MWEG has been invited into. And I like the imagery of the potluck, of bringing what's best, what we know and do best to MWEG, and then being able to share that with other people and other communities. And it's great. It's hopefully that same feeling will carry over. We have coming up tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday, we still are hosting the Abortion Talks host screenings. So if anybody would like to join us, you can register to host one of those and grab a family member, grab a neighbor, grab your best friend, and sit and watch that and have a discussion on peacemaking and how that works in your life and how MWEG has influenced that. How, if you want more details or more materials on doing that, MWEG can provide those for you. We shared some practical peacemaking skills and information at the Restore gathering recently. So we have an abundance of peacemaking materials and skills that we would love to share with everybody. So that's another way that you can participate with us and be part of MWEG and bringing your voice together with all of ours. So we would invite you to do that. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the work you're doing for MWEG and moving us along in this journey in this world. So if anybody has any comments, we would love if you would leave that in the Facebook discussion group, or if anybody here on the Zoom I know we have one person on our, is it Kayleen that's on our Zoom? Welcome here, and anyway, leave those comments in the Facebook discussion group, and we will see you next week for some media literacy. So thank you.